The grand archives of Xylo's Prime hummed with the quiet efficiency of 1,000 sentient minds, each dedicated to the preservation and interpretation of galactic history. Ambassador Lyra, a multi-limbed, shimmering being from the KRYLL collective, gestured with disdain at a crumbling data slate. "Observe, human archivist Kalen," she clicked, her voice a series of condescending chirps. "These primitive marks, as your species quaintly calls them, are from the early exploratory phase of the Forlag Imperium. A truly barbaric script, barely more than ideograms. They appear to be cautionary tales. Childish warnings of darkness beyond the stars and suns that weep crimson. So utterly unscientific." Lyra's fellow archivists, a diverse collection of alien scholars, chuckled politely, their own highly advanced languages far removed from such crude expressions. Kalen, a human with a knack for patterns and an unsettling respect for forgotten things, merely frowned, his gaze lingering on the faded symbols. For centuries, the Galactic Council had enjoyed an era of unprecedented peace and scientific advancement, the Pax Galactica. Their understanding of the universe was comprehensive, based on meticulous data collection and advanced theoretical physics. Primitive superstitions, ancient myths, and unscientific warnings from less developed species were considered quaint historical footnotes, interesting for their anthropological value but devoid of actual truth. The Council prided itself on logic, reason, and empirical evidence. Anything that defied their carefully constructed models was dismissed as folklore. This intellectual arrogance, however, had blinded them to the possibility that some ancient fears might have had very real, very terrifying origins. Kalen, unlike his alien colleagues, saw something more than primitive art in the Forlag markings. He had spent his childhood devouring forgotten Earth myths, tales of cosmic horrors, slumbering gods, and ancient evils lurking in the void. His human ancestors, less advanced but perhaps more attuned to raw, untamed existence, had often encoded vital warnings in allegorical forms. The Forlag symbols, with their repeated motifs of shattered light, screaming voids, and stars, blinking out, resonated with a primal dread he recognized. He began to cross-reference them with other, similarly dismissed ancient records from different species, the Shadow Blight, legends of the Ilari, the Great Silence, myths of the Drakari. All contained similar, unsettling imagery. "Still dabbling in your Terran superstitions, Kalen?" Lyra chided one cycle. "These are just patterns born of fear, not observation. The Void Eaters of the Forlag? A child's bogeyman, nothing more. Our advanced sensors detect no such phenomena beyond the known cosmic background radiation." She presented him with a detailed astrophysical survey of the very regions the Forlag symbols warned against, showing them to be perfectly normal, if sparse, sectors of space. Kalen just pointed to a specific, repeating pattern in the Forlag script. "This isn't just darkness, Lyra. This is a lack of something. A specific kind of void. And this symbol, the bleeding star, it always appears just before the void." Driven by his intuition, Kalen requested access to the deepest, least accessed archives, the raw, unfiltered data logs from ancient exploratory probes. He wasn't looking for monsters, but for patterns, for anomalies that had been deemed insignificant or sensor glitches. After weeks of sifting through terabytes of forgotten data, he found it. A series of incredibly faint, almost imperceptible dips in gravitational readings from several star systems near the galactic rim, all clustered around the regions the Forlag warned against. The dips were too subtle to trigger any automated alerts, too fleeting to register on most long-range scans. But they were there. And they were moving. Kalen presented his findings to Lyra and the senior archivists. He showed them the faint gravitational echoes, overlaying them with the Forlag symbols. "These aren't just dips, Lyra," he explained, pointing. "These are consistent, repeating fluctuations, almost like a ripple. And look at their trajectory, they're heading inwards, towards the core worlds. The bleeding star symbol? It could be a star experiencing a micronova, a phenomenon that temporarily creates powerful gravitational waves. The archivists still scoffed. Gravitational anomalies are common, Kalin, Lyra dismissed. And micronovae are isolated events. To suggest they are connected to these primitive marks is highly speculative. Undeterred, Kalin went directly to the Galactic Council. He laid out his case, presenting the ancient forelag warnings, his cross-referenced data from other species, and the subtle but undeniable gravitational echoes. He spoke of primal fears, of forgotten threats, and of the arrogance of dismissing ancient wisdom. These aren't superstitions, Chancellor Vlor, Kalin pleaded. These are warnings. The forelag, for all their barbarity, recorded something truly terrifying before they went silent. Something that is now moving towards us. Vlor, ever the pragmatist, acknowledged the data was intriguing, but still too circumstantial to warrant a full galactic alert. The Council had other, more pressing, concerns. Frustrated but resolute, Kalin turned to his own people. He contacted Admiral Jianli, who had commanded humanity's forces in the Forelag War. Li, a man who had seen the true brutality of conflict, listened intently. So, you're saying the Forelag, a species we practically erased, left us a warning from beyond the grave? Li mused. That's, ironically human. Alright, Kalin. We'll deploy a few deep space probes. Off the books. Just in case your childish warnings are about something genuinely nasty. Within cycles, stealth probes, equipped with highly sensitive gravitational sensors, were dispatched to the galactic rim, focusing on the coordinates Kalin provided. Weeks later, the probes sent back their findings. The faint gravitational ripples Kalin had detected were not isolated anomalies. They were part of a colossal, almost imperceptible wave, slowly propagating through the void. And at its source, in the darkest, sparsest regions of the galactic rim, the probes found something that chilled even the veteran Admiral Li to the bone. Not stars weeping crimson, but entire nebulae, once vibrant with stellar nurseries, now completely dark. And within that darkness, enormous, impossible shapes that absorbed all light, all energy, all matter. The Forelag had called them void eaters. Humanity called them gravitic abominations. These entities weren't just dark, they were actively anti-light. They didn't just consume matter, they consumed spacetime itself, leaving behind ripples that distorted gravity. They were slow, impossibly vast, and utterly indifferent to conventional physics. They were not alive in any recognizable sense, but rather a fundamental force of entropy given terrifying form. And they were heading straight for the core worlds, absorbing everything in their path. The Forelag's primitive marks weren't warnings of monsters, they were warnings of a fundamental threat to existence, a slow, inexorable wave of cosmic oblivion. Admiral Li immediately transmitted Kalin's findings and the probe data to the Galactic Council. The reaction was immediate and chaotic. The sleek, logical minds of the archivists and diplomats, accustomed to predictable threats, shattered under the weight of an unimaginable, existential horror. Lyra, the KRYLL ambassador, who had mocked Kalin's primitive marks, now watched the projected images of entire star systems vanishing, her chitinous shell trembling. Impossible. She clicked, her voice filled with primal terror. Our models, our science. But the data was undeniable. The Galactic Council, now unified in their terror, turned to humanity. Their conventional weapons were useless against entities that consumed light and warped gravity. The gravitic abominations couldn't be shot, bombed, or even reasoned with. This was not a war of conquest, it was a struggle for the very fabric of reality. What can we do? Chancellor Vlor asked, his luminescent form dull with despair. Kalin, the unassuming archivist, stood firm. The Forelag record spoke of sealing the void, not fighting it. We need to create something that can contain them, something that can disrupt their very nature. Humanity's scientists, engineers, and even its artists were mobilized. They delved into the very primitive marks Kaelin had studied, reinterpreting ancient forelag and other species allegories as technical blueprints. The sealing ritual, once dismissed as magical thinking, was analyzed for its underlying physics. What if the forelag hadn't been casting spells, but describing complex, pre-technological methods of spatial manipulation? The answer lay in harmonics, in resonant frequencies, and in a specific, chaotic energy pattern that could destabilize spacetime itself. A massive project began, the construction of void sealers, colossal, spherical structures designed to emit these destabilizing frequencies. The gravitic abominations were accelerating. Entire fleets from other species, deploying their most powerful conventional weaponry, evaporated upon contact. The core worlds braced for impact. Panic spread across the galaxy, with billions fleeing towards the rim, ironically, towards the very regions the forelag had warned against. Humanity's void sealers were still under construction, a desperate race against cosmic annihilation. Kaelin, now an advisor to the Galactic Council, felt the weight of every lost star, every lost civilization. The mocking laughter of the Archivists had long since been replaced by silent, terrified prayers. The first void sealer was completed just as the leading edge of the gravitic abominations reached the inner rim. It was a massive, crude sphere of reinforced exotic alloys, studded with pulsing energy emitters. Admiral Lee personally commanded the deployment, his dreadnoughts shielding the delicate structure as it moved into position. With Kaelin at his side, guiding the frequency calculations based on the ancient forelag patterns, the void sealer activated. A wave of chaotic, spacetime twisting energy erupted, washing over the nearest abomination. The reaction was instant and terrifying. The gravitic abomination, which had consumed stars without a sound, suddenly screamed. It was not an auditory scream, but a psychic, gravitational distortion that ripped through the minds of every sentient being in the sector, causing agony and disorientation. The abomination began to buckle, its form shimmering and contracting, as if fighting an invisible force. The chaotic frequency, derived from the bleeding star symbol, was disrupting its very essence, forcing it to relinquish its hold on spacetime. It was being unmade. One by one, more void sealers were activated along the invasion front. Each one unleashed its chaotic frequency, creating a barrier of spacetime instability that the gravitic abominations could not breach. The Void Eaters were slowed, then halted, their inexorable advance finally checked. The terrifying psychic screams, though agonizing, became a sound of hope, a confirmation that humanity's desperate gamble, based on ancient, primitive warnings, was working. The galaxy, on the brink of annihilation, was given a chance to fight back, not with weapons, but with understanding. The war against the gravitic abominations was far from over, but humanity had provided the key to their containment. Kaelin Vance, once a ridiculed archivist, was now hailed as a savior. The grand archives of Xylos Prime changed forever. The primitive marks were no longer mocked, they were revered, meticulously studied, and cross-referenced with every known ancient text. Archivists, once dismissive of allegory and myth, now understood that true knowledge could come in many forms, often from the least expected sources. Lyra, humbled, often sought Kaelin's counsel, her chiding replaced by genuine respect. The Pax Galactica endured, but it was a humbler, wiser peace. The galaxy had learned a profound lesson: hubris in knowledge could be more dangerous than ignorance. The ancient fears, dismissed as primitive marks, were in fact sophisticated warnings, encoded by species who had encountered cosmic horrors long before advanced science could articulate them. Humanity, with its unique blend of scientific curiosity and primal respect for the unknown, had bridged the gap between ancient wisdom and modern understanding, saving the galaxy from an enemy that defied all modern logic. Across the vast emptiness of the galactic rim, a network of void sealers now stood, silent and vigilant. They pulsed with chaotic energy, a constant hum against the encroaching oblivion. Kalen Vance, now a revered figure, still spent his days in the Grand Archives, but his focus had shifted. He wasn't just interpreting old records, he was looking for new patterns, new warnings, understanding that the universe was far vaster and stranger than any scientific model could encompass. The primitive marks had saved them once. He knew they might need them again. And so, humanity continued its unique role, forever listening to the whispers of the past, to safeguard the future.